The stars had always been quiet. For 10,000 years, the Dominion had moved through the galaxy like a slow wave, swallowing everything in its path. They were old. They were powerful. They had never lost a war because no one had ever truly fought back. High Commander stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Victory, and watched the blue planet grow larger on the Earth. Such a small world, such a young species living on it. His advisors had studied the humans for 3 cycles now, intercepting their radio signals, watching their primitive satellites tumble through orbit. The reports all said the same thing: soft bodies, short lives, a species that could not even stop fighting among themselves. They are divided into hundreds of nations, his science officer had told him. They wage war over land, over resources, over ideas. They are no threat to us. Had agreed. They had conquered 17 species across dozens of star systems. Each time the pattern was the same. They would arrive with overwhelming force. They would demand surrender. The weaker species would submit, and those who did not would be crushed. It was simple. It was efficient. It had worked for. The diplomatic station orbited Mars, a neutral ground chosen by the humans for first contact. Found this amusing. They actually believed there would be negotiations. They actually thought they had a choice. Ambassador Danny stood in the station's main hall and watched the shuttle dock. He was 52 years old, with gray at his temples and scars on his hands from a war fought long ago in a desert on the other side of Earth. He had been a Marine once, before he learned that sometimes words could do what bullets could not, but he had never forgotten how to fight. The airlock opened and the delegation entered. They were tall, nearly 8 feet, with skin like black glass and eyes that glowed faint purple. They moved with the confidence of beings who had never known fear. Behind Danny, his team shifted nervously. He did not. "I am emissary," the lead said. His voice came through the translation device as a smooth, cold tone. "I speak for the Dominion." "Danny, I speak for Earth." Looked around the station with obvious disinterest. "Your species has been observed. Your world has been evaluated. The Dominion has decided to extend an offer of incorporation." "Incorporation," Danny repeated. "You will become part of our empire. Your resources will serve the Dominion. Your people will work in roles suited to their abilities. In exchange, you will receive protection and order." "And if we say no?" His glowing eyes narrowed slightly. It was the first time anyone had asked that question so directly. "Then you will be incorporated by force. The outcome will be the same. The only variable is how much your people will suffer before they accept the inevitable." Danny was quiet for a moment. He thought about his daughter back on Earth, about the cities full of people who had no idea this conversation was happening, about the weight of what he was about to say. Then he smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "I appreciate you being honest," he said. "Let me be honest with you, we decline." "You decline?" "That's right. Earth is not interested in joining your empire. Not today, not ever. You can take your offer and go home." Stared at him. In 3,000 years of diplomacy, no species had ever simply said no. They begged. They negotiated. They tried to bargain for better terms, but they never just refused. "You do not understand," said slowly. "We have conquered 17 species. We have ships that can crack your planet open like an egg. Your technology is primitive. Your military is laughable. You cannot win." "Maybe not," Danny said, "but we can make you bleed. And I promise you, whatever you do to us, we will make you pay for it. Every ship, every soldier, every inch of ground. Is your empire ready for that? Is it ready to fight a species that would rather die than kneel?" Was silent for a long moment. Then he made a sound that the translator rendered as laughter. "You are brave," he said. "Brave and foolish. Your defiance is noted. It will make no difference." The delegation returned to their shuttle. As it pulled away from the station, Danny stood at the window and watched them go. His aide, a young woman named Vance, stepped up beside him. "Did we just start a war?" she asked quietly. No, Danny said. They started it, we just refused to lose. 3 days later, the Dominion formally declared war on humanity. Their announcement was broadcast across the galaxy, to every species under their control, as a warning of what happened to those who them. But something unexpected happened. On 17 conquered worlds, beings who had lived under rule for generations heard the news and felt something stir in their chests. A small, fragile thing they had almost forgotten. Hope. The humans had said no. The humans were going to fight. And if these strange, soft creatures from a small blue world could stand against the Dominion, then maybe, just maybe, they were not as alone as they had believed. On Earth, the news spread quickly. People gathered in the streets in their homes, around screens that showed the war declaration. There was fear, yes, but there was also something else. A cold, hard determination that had carried humanity through ice ages and plagues and world wars. President Maria Santos addressed the planet that night. She stood at a podium, looking into cameras that broadcast her image to every corner of Earth. They think we are weak because we are young, she said. They think we will break because we have broken before, but they do not know us. They do not know what we have survived. They do not know what we are capable of when we fight together. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was steel. We did not ask for this war, but we will finish it, whatever it takes, however long it takes. We will show them what humanity really is. Across the planet, people who had spent their lives divided by borders and beliefs looked at each other and saw something new. Not strangers, not enemies, family, one species standing together against the darkness. They had made a mistake. They had looked at humanity and seen prey. They had studied human conflicts and seen weakness. They had watched humans fight each other and assumed that was all they could do. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Admiral had been in the Navy for 30 years. She had commanded ships in 3 oceans and led the first human fleet to Saturn's moons, but nothing in her career had prepared her for this. She stood in the war room of the carrier relentless, watching holographic displays fill with red dots. Each dot was a warship. There were hundreds of them. Their fleet entered the system 6 hours ago, her tactical officer said. They are heading for Mars. At current speed, they will arrive in 18 hours. Studied the display. The ships were massive, each one the size of a small city. Their weapons could fire beams of energy that cut through steel like paper. Their shields could stop anything humanity had ever built. On paper, this was not a battle. It was an execution. But had never been good at reading paper. Show me what we have, she said. The display shifted. Blue dots appeared, scattered and small compared to the enemy fleet. 12 carriers, 40 destroyers, 100 fighter squadrons. Everything humanity had managed to build in the years since they first reached for the stars. It was not enough. Everyone in the room knew it was not enough. Ma'am, Lieutenant Commander Ben Torres said carefully, our projections show that we cannot win a direct engagement. Their technology is simply too advanced. Perhaps we should consider evacuation of the outer colonies and consolidate our defenses around Earth. Shook her head. No, we give them Mars, they will want Earth next. We give them Earth, they will want everything. We fight here. But the odds. Forget the odds. Turned to face her command staff. These were good people, brave people. They deserved to understand what they were about to do and why. Do you know what makes humanity different from every other species they have conquered? No one answered. We are persistence hunters, she said. Our ancestors did not have claws or fangs. They were not fast. They were not strong, but they could do something no other predator could. They could keep going. They would chase prey for days across deserts and mountains, never stopping, never resting until their target collapsed from exhaustion. That is what we are. We do not stop. She pointed at the red dots on the display. Those things out there, they have better ships, better weapons, better everything. But they come from a world without predators. They evolved in paradise. They have never been hunted. They have never been afraid. They do not know what it means to fight something that simply refuses to die. Tactical Officer Price spoke up. "What are your orders, Admiral?" Smiled. It was the same smile Danny had shown the ambassador, the smile of a predator. "We teach them." The Battle of Mars would be remembered for 1,000 years. It was not supposed to be a battle at all. They expected the human fleet to scatter and run. They expected fear. They expected surrender. What they got was something else entirely. Human ships flew straight at the enemy line, ignoring the energy beams that tore through their hulls. Damaged carriers rammed into cruisers, their crews detonating reactors at the moment of impact. Fighter pilots ejected into the vacuum of space and used their last breaths to guide missiles into enemy engines. A destroyer named the Chicago, its hull torn open and its crew dying, managed to crash into the command ship and destroy it before finally breaking apart. They had never seen anything like it. They had fought 17 species, and all of them had followed the same logic. When the battle was lost, you retreated. When your ship was destroyed, you surrendered. When you were outnumbered, and you gave up. Humans did not follow that logic. A young pilot named Jack Miller flew his damaged fighter directly into the bridge of a carrier. His last transmission was recorded and broadcast across Earth. "Tell my mom I love her, and tell those crystal bastards they can go to hell." A Marine squad led by Sergeant boarded an enemy ship through a hole blown in its side. They fought through corridors filled with soldiers, losing people at every turn until they reached the reactor and set it to overload. When the ship exploded, its final message was simple: for Earth. The battle lasted 14 hours. When it was over, humanity had lost 60% of its fleet, but they had lost more. They had lost their sense of invincibility. High Commander reviewed the battle reports in his quarters aboard the Eternal Victory. His hands were shaking. He had never seen his hands shake before. "They did not retreat," he said to his advisors. "Why did they not retreat?" "Unknown," his science officer replied. "Their behavior does not match any known pattern. They continued fighting even when victory was impossible. They sacrificed themselves to destroy single ships. It is irrational." "It is not irrational," said quietly. "It is something else, something we do not have a word for." The word was spite. Humans had been practicing it for thousands of years. It was the ability to hurt your enemy even when it cost you everything. It was the choice to fight not because you could win, but because you refused to lose. They had never encountered it before because no species in their history had ever possessed it. On Earth, the survivors of the Battle of Mars were welcomed as heroes, but there was no celebration. People watched the names of the dead scroll across their screens and made quiet promises. This was not over. This was just the beginning. In laboratories across the planet, scientists worked day and night to understand the technology recovered from destroyed ships. In training camps, new soldiers prepared for battles to come. In factories, workers built new ships faster than anyone thought possible. Promoted to Fleet Admiral, addressed her remaining forces. "They thought this battle would break us," she said. "They thought we would see our dead and lose hope, but that is not who we are. Every person we lost today is a reason to keep fighting. Every ship they destroyed is a debt we will collect." She looked at the stars on the. Somewhere out there they were regrouping, planning their next attack. They still had more ships, more soldiers, more weapons, but they had learned something today. They had learned that humans would not break. They had learned that this war would cost them more than they ever imagined. They wanted a war, said. Now they have won. 6 months had passed since the Battle of Mars. They had pushed forward, taking colony after colony, but every victory cost them more than they expected. And now something strange was happening. Something that kept High Commander awake in his quarters, staring at reports he did not understand. Supply convoys were vanishing. Patrol ships entered asteroid fields and never came out. Outposts went silent in the middle of the night. Soldiers reported hearing things in the darkness, seeing shadows that moved when nothing should be moving. The humans were not fighting a war. They were haunting one. On the occupied colony of New Vienna, a man named Chris Harding crouched in the ruins of what had once been a school. He was 40 years old, a former construction worker with big hands and tired eyes. Before the invasion, he had never fired a gun. Now he led a resistance cell of 60 fighters who had killed more than any battalion in the regular military. "They patrol in groups of 6, he whispered to his team. 2 scouts in front, 4 soldiers behind. The scouts carry light weapons. The soldiers carry the heavy stuff. We hit the scouts first, fast and quiet, then fall back before the soldiers can react. By the time they figure out what happened, we are gone." A young woman named Amy Porter checked her rifle. She was 23, a college student who had been studying medicine when they came. Now she used that knowledge to patch up wounded fighters and to understand exactly where to shoot to make it hurt. "What about their armor?" she asked. "Joints," Chris said. "Under the arms, behind the knees, the neck. Their armor is strong, but it has gaps just like ours." They moved out at midnight, slipping through rubble and wreckage, invisible in the darkness. They had powerful sensors, but they were designed to detect ships and vehicles, not individual humans crawling through the dirt. Another mistake. Another thing the conquerors did not understand about their enemy. The ambush lasted 12 seconds. The scouts died before they could call for help. By the time the soldiers opened fire, the humans were already gone, melting into the ruins like ghosts. They left behind only bodies and a message painted on the wall in blood: "We are still here." Across the occupied territories, scenes like this played out every night. They controlled the cities, but they did not control the shadows. They had the firepower, but they did not have the will to use it against an enemy they could not find. And slowly, steadily, they began to lose. Commander read the latest intelligence report and felt something cold settle in his stomach. The humans were adapting, not just in combat, but in everything. Their scientists had taken wreckage from destroyed ships and figured out how the technology worked. Their engineers had the shield generators and improved them. Their doctors had studied captured soldiers and found weaknesses in their biology that even the Dominion's own medical experts had not known. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "They have had this technology for months. We have had it for thousands of years. How can they improve upon it so quickly?" His science officer hesitated. "We believe it is related to their short. They live only 80 years, sometimes less. Because of this, they have developed a culture of rapid innovation. They do not wait for the next generation to solve problems. They solve them immediately or they die. It is efficient." "Efficient," repeated. The word tasted bitter. Back on Earth, Dr. Lisa stood before a room full of military leaders and presented her team's latest creation. She was small, soft-spoken, and looked like she had not slept in weeks, but her eyes burned with something fierce. "The shield technology operates on a frequency rotation principle," she explained, pointing to diagrams on the screen. "Every 3 seconds, the shield shifts to a new frequency to prevent targeting. Our weapons could not track the shifts fast enough to penetrate, but we found a solution." She pressed a button, and the display changed to show a new weapon design. "We call it the blink cannon. Instead of trying to track the frequency, it fires a burst of energy across all possible frequencies simultaneously. One of them will always match. The shield cannot block what it cannot predict." General Frank, a stocky man with a permanent frown, leaned forward. "Does it work?" Lisa smiled. "We tested it on a captured shuttle. The shuttle does not exist anymore." The room was silent for a moment. Then someone laughed. Then everyone was laughing, the sound of people who had been afraid for too long finally finding a reason to hope. But the war was far from over. They still controlled most of humanity's colonies. They still had more ships, more soldiers, more resources, and they were starting to adapt as well, learning from their mistakes, adjusting their tactics. The easy victories were over. What came next would be harder. On New Vienna, Chris Harding received a message from Earth. Supplies were coming, new weapons, new soldiers, most importantly, a plan. They want us to hold out for 3 more months, he told his fighters. 3 months and then the counterattack begins. Can we do it? Amy Porter looked around at the tired, wounded, determined faces of her fellow fighters. People who had lost everything and kept fighting anyway. People who had learned to be ghosts. 3 months, she said. We can do 3 years if we have to. Chris nodded. That was the thing about humans. You could push them, hurt them, break them, and they would get back up. You could take everything they had and they would find something else to fight with. You could kill them, and their children would keep fighting in their place. They had conquered 17 species because those species had been reasonable. They had done the math, seen they could not win, and surrendered. Humans did not work that way. Humans did not do math. Humans did spite. And spite, as they were learning, was a weapon more powerful than any cannon. In his quarters aboard the Eternal Victory, High Commander stared at a map of the galaxy. Red dots marked territory, blue dots marked humanity's remaining holdouts. The red far outnumbered the blue. By any logical measure, the war was already won. But could not shake the feeling that he was missing something, that the numbers did not tell the whole story, that somewhere in those small blue dots something was growing, something patient, something hungry, something that would not stop until it had taken back everything the Dominion had stolen. He was right. 2 years into the war, the humans came for what they had taken. It started at a place called Station, a supply depot on the edge of Dominion space. The garrison there numbered 5,000 soldiers, protected by orbital defense platforms and a fleet of 30 warships. It was supposed to be impenetrable. It was supposed to be safe. At 3 in the morning, station time, every light went out. Captain Cole led the assault from the front. He was 35 years old, a quiet man who had grown up on a farm in Kansas and never expected to see the stars. Now he floated through the darkness of an enemy station, his rifle raised, his team behind him, hunting. "Remember," he said through his helmet radio, "we are not here to conquer, we are here to free. They are the enemy. Anyone they have enslaved is a potential ally. Do not fire on non-combatants." The battle for Station lasted 4 hours. When it was over, the garrison was destroyed, and the supply depot was in human hands. But that was not the important part. The important part was what they found in the lower levels. Thousands of beings, packed into cramped cells, wearing chains that had rubbed their limbs raw. They were not. They were something else. A species called the small and furry with large dark eyes, taken from their generations ago to serve as laborers for the Dominion. Stood in the doorway of the first cell and looked at the creatures huddled inside. They stared back at him with fear. They did not know what humans were. They only knew that their masters had been killed, and now something new had come. Slowly knelt down. He set his rifle on the ground. He held out his empty hands. "You are free," he said. The translator in his helmet converted the words. "The Dominion does not own you anymore. No one does." They did not move. Freedom was a concept they had forgotten. Their parents had been slaves. Their grandparents had been slaves. They did not know what to do with it. A young, barely more than a child, stepped forward. She touched his hand with her small fingers, feeling the strange texture of human skin. "You are real," she said. "The stories are real." "What stories?" "The stories of the hunters, the ones who would not stop, the ones who would come for us." Her voice trembled. "We thought they were just dreams." Felt something catch in his throat. He had signed up to fight a war. He had not expected this. He had not expected to become a legend to people he had never met. "Not dreams," he said. "We just got here as fast as we could." Word of Station spread across the galaxy. They told other slaves who told others who told others still. The message was always the same. The humans are coming. The humans do not stop. If you hold on, if you survive, they will find you. On a dozen worlds, resistance movements that had been dead for centuries began to stir. Beings who had accepted their fate as property of the Dominion started to ask questions, started to hope, started to plan. Admiral directed the liberation campaign from her flagship, now called the Avenger. She had aged in the 2 years since the war began. Her hair was completely gray now, and she walked with a limp from an injury she refused to talk about. But her eyes were the same, sharp, hungry, unbroken. "They are pulling back," her tactical officer reported. "They are consolidating their forces around their core systems. They are abandoning the outer territories." "Good," said. "That means they are scared. That means we are winning." But she knew it was not that simple. The still had their largest fleets, still had weapons that humanity had never seen. The outer territories were just the beginning. The real fight was still to come. On Earth, the war effort had transformed everything. Factories ran day and night, producing ships and weapons at a pace that should have been impossible. Scientists worked in bunkers deep underground, developing new technologies faster than anyone thought possible. And everywhere, in every city and town, people found ways to contribute. A grandmother named organized a network of volunteers who packaged food and supplies for troops on the front lines. A teenager named Park built communication devices in his garage that the military ended up adopting for field use. A retired teacher named George spent his days writing letters to soldiers, thousands of letters, because he believed that morale mattered as much as ammunition. This was what they had never understood. They saw humanity as a species. They did not see it as a family. Every human, from the youngest child to the oldest elder, was part of the war effort, not because they were forced, because they chose to be. Cole and his battalion pushed deeper into Dominion space, liberating world after world. Each one was the same: slaves freed, chains broken, beings who had never known hope learning what it felt like. On a planet called 4, they found a species that had been under control for 600 years. They were tall and slender, with silver skin and voices like music. When some Marines touched down, the elders came to meet them. "We have waited so long," the eldest said, tears streaming down her metallic face. "We passed the stories to our children who passed them to their children. The stories said that one day someone would come, someone would remember us." Removed his helmet so she could see his face. Human, strange, soft, nothing like the who had ruled them for centuries. "We did not forget you," he said. "We just got here as fast as we could." They joined the coalition that same day. So did and a dozen other species that had been waiting for someone to show them that resistance was possible. The war was no longer humanity against the Dominion. It was everyone against the Dominion. Admiral addressed the combined fleet before the final push toward space. Human ships flew alongside cruisers and frigates and vessels from species whose names humanity had not known a year ago. It was the largest fleet the galaxy had ever seen, united by a single purpose. "They wanted to know what makes us special," said. "This is what makes us special. We do not give up, we do not forget. And when we fight for everyone, not just ourselves, everyone." She looked at the stars on somewhere out there they were waiting. The final battle was coming. The war would end one way or another. "Let us finish this," she said. The fleet moved forward, toward the heart of the Dominion, toward the end of an empire that had stood for 10,000 years. And at the front of the formation, leading the charge, were the hunters from Earth, the ones who would not stop, the ones who had been waiting their whole history for an enemy worthy of their fury. The deadliest species in the galaxy was coming home. High Commander stood in the Hall of Conquest, the most sacred place on The walls were lined with trophies from 17 conquered species, weapons that had failed to stop the Dominion, flags that had flown over fallen capitals, crowns that had belonged to kings who now served as slaves. For 10,000 years, this hall had been a monument to power. Now it felt like a tomb. They showed the approaching fleet. Human ships flew at the center, flanked by vessels from species that had ruled for centuries. Others that had not thought about in decades. They had all been so quiet, so obedient. And now they were here, with weapons pointed at the world that had enslaved them. "How many ships?" asked. His voice sounded strange to him, hollow. 4,732, his tactical officer replied. "Our fleet numbers 3,000. We are outnumbered." Outnumbered. They had never been outnumbered. They had never faced an enemy that could match them, let alone surpass them. And now, looking at the fleet on the screen, understood something he should have understood years ago. They had not been fighting a war. They had been waking up a monster. The communication screen flickered and a face appeared. Human, male, older now with gray hair and lines around his eyes, but recognized him. The ambassador who had refused to kneel. The man who had smiled when he should have begged. "Commander," Danny said, "it has been a while." Ambassador kept his voice steady. Pride was all he had left. "You have come a long way." "We have. It was not easy. A lot of good people died to get here. Good people from a lot of different worlds." Danny paused. "Your empire killed millions, Commander. You enslaved billions more. You thought you could do that forever because no one was strong enough to stop you. And now you believe you are strong enough." Danny shook his head. "I know we are. That is not the question. The question is what happens next." Behind Danny, other figures appeared on the screen. Representatives from every species the Dominion had conquered, with their silver skin, with their dark eyes, with their heavy scales. They stood together, united, looking at the being who had ruled their people for generations. "We could destroy you," Danny said. "We have the ships. We have the weapons. We could crack your planet open the way you threatened to crack ours. And honestly, there are a lot of people who think we should." Said nothing. There was nothing to say. "But that is not who we are," Danny leaned forward. "You asked once what made humanity special. You studied us. You watched us fight each other. You thought that was weakness. You were wrong. We fight because we are still learning, still growing, still figuring out how to be better." He gestured to the beings behind him. "Every species you conquered could have destroyed you by now. They have that right. You took everything from them, but they chose something else. They chose to be better than you were." "What do you want?" asked. The words came out as a whisper. "Surrender, complete and unconditional. Your fleets will be disarmed. Your leaders will face trial for what they have done. Your empire will become a memory. And my people will be treated the way they should have treated others, with fairness, with dignity, with a chance to learn from their mistakes." Danny's expression softened just slightly. "We are not here to replace one empire with another, Commander. We are here to make sure no one ever builds an empire like yours again." Looked at the trophies on the walls around him. 10,000 years of conquest. 10,000 years of believing that strength meant domination, that power meant cruelty, that the strong had the right to rule the weak. And now a species that lived only 80 years had torn it all down. "You could have been like us," he said quietly. "You have the strength, the capability. You could have conquered the galaxy if you wanted to." Danny nodded. "Yes, we could have, but we chose not to. That is what makes us different." The Dominion surrendered within the hour. There was no celebration, not at first. The work was too important, the wounds too fresh. Human peacekeepers spread across former Dominion space, helping to rebuild worlds that had been stripped of resources for. Scientists shared technology freely, teaching species that had been knowledge for generations. Doctors treated the sick. Teachers opened schools. And slowly, carefully, a new galaxy began to take shape. On 4, Cole stood in a plaza that had once been the site of public executions. They had used it to punish resistance. Now it was a garden, filled with flowers that had not grown on this world for 600 years. A child approached him. She was small, barely up to his waist, with curious silver eyes. "Are you a human?" she asked. "I am. My grandmother says humans are the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. She says you are hunters who never stop." Knelt down so he was at her level. "Your grandmother is right. We can be very dangerous when we have to be, but we can also be kind. Sometimes the same thing that makes you dangerous is what lets you protect the people who need protecting." The child thought about this. "Will you protect us?" "Yes, for as long as you need us to." She smiled and ran off to play with other children. Human, all together, laughing and shouting in a dozen languages. The future, learning how to live without fear. Back on Earth, the monuments went up. Names carved in stone, too many names, remembering those who had died so that others could be free. Attended every ceremony she could, even after her health began to fail. She owed them that much. Danny returned to the diplomatic station where it had all begun. It had been rebuilt since the war, larger and more beautiful than before. Ships from 100 worlds docked there now, carrying traders and travelers and visitors who wanted to see the planet that had started everything. He stood at the window where he had watched the leaves so many years ago. He was old now, his hands shook, but his eyes were clear. A young aide approached him. "Ambassador, the delegation from the coalition is ready. They want to discuss the new trade agreement." Danny nodded and turned away from the window. There was always more work to do, more connections to make, more bridges to build. The war was over, but the real challenge was just beginning. Building a galaxy where no one had to be afraid, where no one had to be a slave, where every species could find its own path. It would take generations. It would be messy and difficult and full of setbacks, but humanity was good at that. They had been practicing for their entire history. Before he left, Danny looked up at the stars one more time. Somewhere out there were worlds he would never see, species he would never meet, possibilities he could not imagine. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders, and now, for the first time, it was free to explore them. "Not bad," he said to himself, "for a species from a little blue rock." He smiled and went back to work. Across the galaxy, on 100 worlds, beings looked up at the same stars and thought the same thing. The humans had come. The humans had freed them. And now, together, they would build something new. The age of empires was over. The age of cooperation had begun. And at the heart of it all were the hunters from Earth, the deadliest species in the galaxy, who had chosen in the end to use their power not to conquer but to protect, not to destroy but to heal, not to rule but to serve. That was what made them truly dangerous. That was what made them truly great.